Hello and welcome to Coeo Conversations, where we're going to focus on a new service offering, which we call Configuration Optimization as a Service. I'm joined by two colleagues, Kieran Sutherland and James Lean, who are going to talk through this. And I've got a bunch of questions which hopefully will help you learn a bit more about the service and why we've developed it and how we use this service to help customers. Just in kicking off, Kieran, can you tell us what is COaaS?
COAS is our configuration optimization as a service program. It was developed by the team in dedicated support. And the idea behind COAS is that we're continually ensuring that our customers' solutions that are deployed and managed by Coeo are conforming to Microsoft best practice for configuration, maintenance, performance, and security.
And can you talk through why we've developed COaaS?
We developed COAS because there was quite a need from our customers to ensure that we were continually helping them align with Microsoft best practice. Microsoft update the best practice for their SQL Server technologies fairly regularly, and so we want to ensure that our customers' solutions and environments that we support are always aligned to that best practice with Microsoft. Once we've onboarded a customer into dedicated support, we've conducted that health check, that point in time health check, but then customers often deploy new databases. And what we were keen to do was ensure that as the customers are deploying and running the services in BAU, we were constantly reviewing and ensuring that Microsoft best practice was adhered to and applied across the entire estate.
And can you talk through a bit about the checks that we'll carry out and what the sort of things that we'll check for?
At the moment, we've got a 53-point health check plan that covers four main categories: configuration, maintenance, performance, and security. And within those categories, there are three priorities: high, medium, and low, based on the potential impact to the server. These range from server level configurations to maintenance. Are we doing backups? Are we doing integrity checks regularly? To performance related and database level configurations and optimizations, and some lower level best practices and administration settings that just keep things easily manageable and maintain a consistent platform for administration purposes.
What's the benefit of running COaaS for our customers? What do they get out of it?
The benefit to customers is that they can be assured that on a regular basis we are maintaining a stable platform that is configured optimally for those four key areas that we mentioned. Often with systems, things do change. You get configuration drift. Lots of developers, administrators may be touching those systems, making changes. So at regular touch points during the year, we're looking to baseline that system and make sure that things stay optimally configured.
We've also found that for customers that subscribe to our COAS for unsupported instances, they've been able to reduce things like development cycles as well and get products to market faster because the configuration of the dev test and UAT environment will mirror exactly the production environment that we are supporting under dedicated support as well.
What process do you follow?
The way we run the checks is that we have a set of scripts that we run that pull data across the supported environment from the different SQL servers. That gets collated and loaded into a database. And then there are a set of reports that sit on top of that that are made available to the customer through our Coeo portal. Once we've run those checks, we'll generally have a follow-up meeting with the client to go through the results of those and agree any remediation steps that may be necessary. The client may want to take that away themselves, or they, as part of dedicated support, if they're supported servers, we will take any remediation actions that are necessary. Another part of that process is to review any settings that the customer may have made deliberately. So obviously our checks are based on default best practice recommendations, but under certain circumstances, there may be reasons that certain configurations are set a specific way. So where that's the case, we'll add exclusions for those checks so that in future executions of the checks, then we'll know that that's set specifically and we won't raise that again in future.
And how often should customers expect these health checks to be run?
So the health checks that we currently run for our existing support customers are determined by the contract schedule. So typically most customers have a quarterly Healthcheck that we'll provide as part of the dedicated support service as a feature enhancement or a service enhancement to our dedicated support service. We do enable customers to increase the frequency of those health checks. So we have some customers that run the health check on a monthly basis. And conversely, we have some customers that subscribe to COaaS for unsupported instances where we might be checking the unsupported instances on an annual basis, so not as frequently because they're less service impacting or less important from the customer perspective, but still it's important to ensure that that best practice is adhered to as much as possible across the entire estate. So the customer really has the option of monthly, quarterly or annually.
And some of our customers run really critical workloads. Can you talk through any kind of technical impact or risk? Is there any chance this could cause problems with the SQL Server estate?
The COaaS Healthcheck scripts are completely read-only, so they are purely pulling and reading data from various system tables and views. So there is zero impact to the server while these are running. They generally run in a few seconds. It's a read-only workload. We're not changing anything at all when we run these checks, so that obviously once we've reviewed those results and we've agreed any changes, that's done at a later stage. But in terms of running the checks, there should be zero impact on the server.
And some of our customers have quite lean operations teams. They don't have DBA specialists there. So what sort of involvement is needed from the customer? What's needed technically for this to happen?
In terms of running the checks, there's no involvement at all from the customer. There's an initial setup process for customers where we already support the environment. We already have the necessary access into their network and permissions to the servers to run these checks. So there's nothing else needed. For new customers, there is a setup and onboarding process where we need to set up obviously access into their environment, get provisioned with accounts that have permissions to read the data from SQL Server. But once that initial setup is done, the regular checks that we run need no further involvement at all.
And it's quite a quick process to get that set up from our side and from the customer side generally once the accounts are provisioned and the access is there.
And how do we ensure that latest best practice is followed? You know, when Microsoft update their best practice, how do we maintain the rules and logic here?
As a company, we work closely with Microsoft, and we have a number of engineers with many years experience in the team. We follow all the latest Microsoft blogs and articles, and we have catch-ups with Microsoft internal staff on a regular basis. So if there are any changes to the documentation or best practices, then we'll look to reflect those in our recommendations as part of the COaaS checks.
Yeah, and that's one of the really important things is that we're constantly reviewing what those best practice recommendations are so that we can ensure that our customers that are benefiting from this COaaS service are getting the most up-to-date recommendations. So it's not just a point in time snapshot of where they are, it's the most up-to-date recommendations from Microsoft in terms of best practice.
And that sounds great. So customers are going to get a bunch of recommendations or problems. How do you recommend, or how would customers normally go about remediating those issues that have been identified?
So customers have several different options when it comes to the remediation of any issues that might have been highlighted as part of the COaaS service. The first is to perform self-remediation, and quite often customers will look to this as the cheapest way of remediating some of the issues that are highlighted. So you can go away and we'll provide a detailed report to you of all the checks that were done, the recommendations that were made off the back of those checks, and then you can internally leverage your internal resources in order to remediate those activities. For customers that don't necessarily have the skill or the bandwidth in order to perform the self-remediation activities, we have a whole team of consultants that would be able to engage on either a time and materials or a fixed price, fixed scope, fixed outcome basis to remediate the activities on a select number of servers or all the servers, depending on what the requirement is. The final option for customers when remediating off the back of a COaaS service is to onboard those instances into dedicated support. And obviously, as part of our unlimited dedicated support service, we provide full remediation activities as part of that onboarding process. So customers will be confident and have peace of mind that all of the remediation activities are taken care of for a fixed fee as part of the dedicated support service once onboarded.
And thinking about a customer that's got a bunch of issues that have been identified from the health checks, how can they monitor kind of improvement over time? Because hopefully we'll expect that they'll see a reduction of issues over time.
So we provide all customers that subscribe to the COaaS service for supported instances or for unsupported instances. We provide them with access to our my.coeo portal. The my.coeo portal contains detailed information around the checks that we've done, the results of those checks and the recommendations that we and Microsoft have for best practice in that SQL environment. And we provide that information to customers through our my.coeo portal, and they can track the change in health checks over time. So where we're checking on a quarterly basis, for example, you can drill into the check from last quarter versus the check this quarter. And I think we're going to show some of that in the demonstration later on. But we provide customers with that full auditable, traceable view of the change of their infrastructure over time, moving it hopefully from non-conforming for best practice right through to fully optimized and best practice enabled.
And does the service provide like a one-time report?
No, so as I mentioned, the portal is available there for customers. So if they subscribe on an annual basis, the report will be there for 12 months. They have the ability to go in and drill into the detail of the report. We also provide some time with the engineers as well. So for customers that are non-dedicated support customers, potentially, we provide some time with one of the engineers following the COaaS service to run through the list of recommendations, why Microsoft or Coeo make those recommendations, what the impacts to the organization is there going to be downtime as part of the remediation activities, for example, and our engineers can really work with the customer and the customer's team in order to ensure that they get the best possible service around the remediation activity should they decide to self-remediate.
And can you show us an example, maybe talk through some of the recommendations?
Okay, so this is the first summary screen that you'll see when you come into the portal and click on the Healthcheck link. The first screen here shows us an oversight of the different checks that have been run across time. So you can see here that this is a customer where we've run a check first in last December. We've then repeated the checks across March and then in June. So we're looking at quarterly checks at the moment. So in this top section here, we can see some total numbers. So the total checks is how many checks that we've run across the entirety of the COaaS run, 636. The 4 recommendations here is how many recommendations are still outstanding from the last run. So that gives you an idea of the improvements that have been made over time, again, along with the charts down here. This main chart is broken down by priority, so 1, 2, and 3. And then in the bottom section here, we can see some more breakdown of the details in terms of the number of recommendations that were made in each category and priority. And what this is designed to do is show you the improvement over time. So you can see here when we first onboarded the environment, there were a few priority 1 issues. We've got some maintenance, configuration and performance high priority issues that we would look to remediate as soon as possible. And then once we come through the second time, we've got rid of a few of those, all those priority 1 issues, and then look at some of the lower priority ones. And then finally, we're down to a nice, clean, stable environment. From this screen as well, if you're interested in the details of any of these, so for example, let's have a look at 2 high priority performance issues. We can right click on here, drill through, and we can see the details of that. So we can see on this particular server we've got some CPU schedulers that are offline, which means we're not taking full advantage of the power of the server, and also this priority boost option is enabled, which is one that can cause system instability. So that's available there. This heat map over on the right hand side shows us the breakdown by individual servers for the most recent check that was run. In this case, it was a nice clean check, so there's no one server that's sticking out, but probably in December, one of these servers may have showed that there were more issues that may need to be concentrated on primarily. So from this summary screen, we can look at the batch summary. So by default, this shows us the most recent check, but if we look back at, say, the first one that we ran, this gives us a really nice high-level breakdown of all the recommendations that were found and how they map across each of the servers. So the dark red is the priority 1 issues, and if you hover over each of the squares, that will give you the detail about what was actually found or what the recommendation is. Green is where everything's okay, and then coming down through the slightly lighter red and the yellow for the P2s and P3s. There's also this blue color, which is the P4, which is just informational. The only one of those that we currently have is we show you who's currently got sysadmin access. So that's basically all privileges on the server. That is one that essentially never goes away, because every time we run this, it's a review for the client to say, you know, who's got sysadmin access? Is that still relevant and acceptable? Do we need to make any tweaks to that? So that will always show up. So you can see even in the most recent one where everything's been remediated, those sysadmin members will still show. The other option you have here, by default, as I say, it will only show you where we've made recommendations for a particular check. If you'd like to see all the checks that we have done, we can click this button here, and then that shows you the full list of checks. So you can see that everything's nice and green once we've performed that remediation activity. Again, there's some filters up here, so we can look at a particular instance if we're interested. If we only want to look at the P1s, for example, we can. There were none on this one, but if we choose one where there were some, we'll see those P1 recommendations. And then also we have this details tab here, which gives you all the juicy details of everything. So that might be one where you can come in here. We've got the server name, the priority of the check, and the details, what was actually found. The good thing here is that you can actually use this button here and export the data, so you can export that out into an Excel spreadsheet to send across your team, or use that to manage the remediation if that's what you're looking to do. So that's the juicy detail. So that's what the health checks look like.
James, just going back on that detail section, it's important to show that we can filter that view versus the remediation activities that would require downtime and therefore would need to be worked into any maintenance schedules that you have, versus some of those minor remediation activities that we can undertake without any impact to the business. That would provide great benefit to the company, but to the organisation, but doesn't require any impact in terms of downtime or service outage.
Yeah, that's a good point. Most of the checks, actually, the vast majority of checks don't actually require any downtime to change. So there are various configuration settings, jobs to create, etc., that won't affect the server while you're applying them. There are a small number that will require downtime, so generally that's where we're looking at a SQL Server restart for these changes to take effect. So yes, you can filter this list by that downtime flag to see any that may need to look at arranging a maintenance window and so forth.
And I guess if customers are interested in this service, what should they do next? How can they kind of get started and find out a bit more?
So if a customer wants to learn more about our configuration optimization as a service health check, they can reach out directly through the website, through the contact us section on coeo.com, or alternatively drop an email to info@coeo.com, and one of the sales team will be in touch to arrange a further discussion around the COaaS service, how we do it, what we do it, and some of the prices that are associated with that.
Okay, fantastic. hope that that's been useful and helped you learn a little bit more about how we help some of our customers maintain their estate in the best state possible, operating and optimized to get the most out of the data and the most out of the platform. Thanks very much for listening, and thanks to our speakers.